Welcome back to the Safe, Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers. We're talking today about 911. What is that? How does it work? Who is the person on the other end of the line, and when do you use 911, and when would you not use it? This is the Safe, Secure 360 podcast. There is safety in numbers.
The information provided in our podcasts is for general information uses only and is not intended as legal advice. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own. Always consult with a qualified professional before making safety and security decisions. For more information about this topic, check out our website at SAFESECURE360.com. What is 911? When I call 911, there's a person that answers. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on the other end of 911 and what is that service meant for?
Well, that's a good question. When I was growing up, we didn't have 911. We had, you would call the operator, or you would call a direct number to the police or fire or ambulance. Or there were call boxes, commonly in metropolitan cities for sure. So I think that the advent of 911 is kind of a great idea because it's the clearinghouse, it's the focus of when you need emergency services. And typically they fall into three categories. Police, if there is a crime in progress or there's some type of legal event going on that could result in someone being arrested or charged or someone harmed or hurt or something like that. And then there's fire. Obviously, if something's on fire, you would summon the fire department through that method. And the last one is a medical emergency. If you needed an ambulance, how would you call them efficiently and clearly and quickly? So 911 is a service that is throughout our country. And it is ran by civilian employees of 911, and they are partnered typically with a police department, fire department, EMS provider, and they work alongside or with them, perhaps sometimes in the same building. Sometimes there's emergency dispatch centers, which are regional, and sometimes they're local. And the people that work there are very skilled in processing 911 calls. So when you call 911, you can expect to be talked with a certified 911 operator. A lot of training goes into this. It's a skilled thing to do. It's a very difficult job to do, but a very necessary one. And I don't think we talk enough about our 911 operators in that process, but I assure you it's very important. It's different from a law enforcement dispatcher. Some real small agencies or rural areas may do the same thing, but typically in a metropolitan city, the 911 operators are separate and apart from the dispatch responsibilities that law enforcement or medical or the fire department has. But they're a partner, and what they do and say and the information they gather from that phone call is critical to the response speed, accuracy of the location, and the arrival of those emergency services that you're requesting. So it's very important service. Safe Secure 360. We are a security consulting group located in the Woodlands, Texas. We assist our multiple clients by reducing the risk, loss, and reputation impact. We also do full security assessments on their facilities, large churches, large private schools in Texas, and we want to help you. Take a look at our website, SAFESECURE360.com.
How do I know when it's time to call 911? For instance, in terms of fire, in a small fire, you can take care of that yourself. That's a fire in my house, should I still call 911, or is that reserved more for a more extreme emergency?
I guess the best answer is to say that in any of these three scenarios, police, fire, or ambulance, when it exceeds your reasonable ability to stop the event from occurring, or to treat it, or to resolve it in some way, then it's time perhaps for a 911 phone call. There's no fee for calling 911. There's no charge to you for calling 911. If you call 911 and there is a response by one of the emergency responders and it turns out that the nature of the call wasn't as serious as you thought it was, or it evolved over the time and de-escalated, those are all opportunities to update 911. That's why it's so critically important when you call 911 to be calm and to stay on the line. In law enforcement, sometimes we would have people that would call 911 and say, "I need the police," click, and they would just hang up. Well, we may usually know where you are from a caller ID and a mapping system that we use. If you're in a residential home, if you're in a building or a company, it's more difficult. If you're on a cell phone, we can get very close, but sometimes it's difficult to know exactly where you are. And remember, when you called 911, you may have moved, or the event may have moved, or you may not be in the same location as you were before. So the best way to determine is it a 911 moment or not is this something serious, or could it become serious that you just can't handle? Is it a police matter that really needs the police to come and save someone or investigate some crime, or has something tragic happened? Is it a fire event where you tried to put out the fire and you were unsuccessful? I would suggest you have a fire extinguisher in your home, but if that was used and was unsuccessful, then it's time for 911. If you have a medical emergency that you cannot treat yourself, or a family member or a friend, or you see something, maybe an automobile accident where someone is injured, that is a 911 moment opportunity. So all of those answers really are based around when you cannot handle it and you cannot provide aid, or the aid that's necessary exceeds your ability or others' ability, it's time to involve professional emergency responders. And that starts with the 911 call taker, a very important job.
I've called 911. I'm ready. I'm telling myself, be calm, be calm. What am I going to tell them? How's this conversation going to go once somebody, 911, what's your emergency? What should I say to them?
Right. The 911 operator is going to come on the line, and usually pretty rapidly. There are some things that have been said in the past about how long it takes to get 911, or 911 isn't effective. I differ with that opinion. Now remember, there are thousands of 911 calls every day. But I can tell you from experience that these 911 call takers and the people that manage this system are truly trained professionals, and they know what they're doing. So when you call 911, they're ready to listen to what you tell them. They don't know which way it's going to go, but they're ready for you. So when you do call them, try and remain calm as much as you can. Certainly it could be an emergency that so excites you that you have difficulty communicating, but try, because it's critically important. You're telling a story to someone that doesn't know the story. And that person is going to ask you qualifying questions and more detailed questions to build that story. Because if that event is then transferred to law enforcement, fire department, or EMS, they're going to give them a basic background story. And then the 911 dispatcher, if they refer you to law enforcement dispatcher or to emergency medical services or the fire department, they're going to ask you additional questions, because that information you're giving them that they're gathering from you is going to be passed on to the ambulance driver. and to the police officer in the car, and to the fire department people that are at the station or riding around waiting for that call to come through. So your story that you tell with the qualifying questions and filtering that the call taker asks you all relate to a story about this emergency or urgent event, and it's preparing the responders to what they're getting into. And it shapes how fast they come. It shapes how many units come. It shapes a lot of things. So it's critically important to remain calm. It's very important to know where you are, if you can. Tell the call taker where you are. Are you at a residence? Are you at a hotel? Are you at a bar? Are you on the side of the street? Are you driving? Are you in a business? And speak clearly if you can. We may know your geographical location from mapping. However, make sure that we know that. Now, if you're bilingual or you have a different language than English that is your primary language, we've already thought about that. The 911 dispatch folks have multiple language speakers. So certainly in Texas, Spanish and English are probably the most common. But there are so many different dialects and so many different languages that are spoken that they've thought that through, and they have call takers who can speak in that language. There may be a short delay to get to that call taker, but it can happen. Also, if you're hearing impaired and you have a TDD or a TDY, that is certainly one way to contact 911 also. And 911 has the TTD and TTY operators who are manning the digital communications network, and then they will interact with you with that method. So they serve everyone. 911 is a very important community service process and organization. But remember, staying on the line as long as you can and listening to what the 911 operator or the law enforcement EMS or fire department operator has to say to you, very important, because they may give you information. They may have you try to triage someone who is in medical distress. They may have you try to put a fire out a different way. They may have you leave and get away from the event. They may give you instructions about what to do. So it's critically important that you stay on the line, that you listen. It's not just a one-way conversation where I say, I need 911, and that's it. It needs to be interactive, a two-way conversation, and it can be updated along the way. Things can change, and as they change, that update to the 911 or to the police or fire ambulance dispatcher then is relayed to the responder, and that may shape or change the responder's approach to the event.
So you've called 911. You've calmly told them your story with as much detail, what's much relevant detail as you can. I'm in a restaurant in the back room. This is happening. I need a police help, I think. And then you're responding to the questions. It may be that you are off the phone and something changes about that. You've already put in your report. They've moved on to dispatch calling out the police. Maybe something's changed about that and you have to call an update. Do you just call 911 again and say, I previously called? How do you update them on a situation? Do I need to know a number of my case or something like that? Or do I just call and say, I just called, I said this is happening, but something's changed. How do I go about updating them?
The dispatchers are going to relate you not to a case number, but to a location and perhaps your name. So there's no downside in giving your name. You certainly can report something anonymously, but giving your name, especially in this scenario that you described, you're in a restaurant and perhaps a robbery is in progress, or there's something going on, a huge fight, or something that you witnessed that's caused you to be alarmed and to make this phone call. My advice is stay on the line with the dispatcher. If they want to terminate the call, then they'll tell you. Let's say that the call is terminated. Let's say that you self-terminated the call and it was a fight. And then you said your story and they said, okay, we're sending someone. And however it happened, the call was disconnected. However, now, for instance, you hear a gunshot in the area where before it was just a physical conflict. That's different. That's new information. That's very valuable information, and you're off the 911 call now. So you would call them back, 911. And you may get a different operator, and you perhaps would get a different operator, but that's okay. What you need to tell them is, this is your name, here's the location that you're at, you previously called about a fight, however, I just heard a gunshot. They're going to ask you qualifying questions. Did you see who was shot? Do you know if anyone was shot? Do you know if anyone was injured? Do you know if multiple people were injured? Do you know what the person or suspect looks like? How many of them are there? How are they dressed? What type of gun do they have? They're going to ask you a series of very direct questions that is going to shape their information they send to the arriving officers. It's very critical. So you may know some of that information, you may not. You may just be able to say, look, I'm in a storeroom, I heard a shot. 1, 2, 3, however many shots you heard. I don't know any of the other information. Please come and help us. I'm here with 4 other people. So as much information as you can give, the better. Staying on the line, the better. Calling back, remember who you are and where you are and what generally is going on from your first call. The dispatchers and call takers are going to talk to each other. And they're going to say, oh, yeah, I talked to him. They may send you back to the original dispatcher. They may, in a combination, deal with your situation, right? So the more information, staying on the line, remaining calm is a great way to engage and deal with 911. That's what they want.
There are so many, like you were saying earlier, there's so many 911 calls. In America, I've read an average of 7.6 calls a second to 911. What makes a 911 call different from a non-emergency call? And then how do I know which one we talked about it before that I can't handle it. So let's talk about the non-emergency. There was a fire in my house, or there was a package on my porch that got taken. I don't think that happened right now. Is that a non-emergency call I would make? And how does that process go about?
Yes, there's a difference between an emergency call and an emergency need for a response in person by a first responder versus something that can be investigated later or something that can be dealt with later or something that is the call taker can use. So typically all law enforcement agencies have a non-emergency phone number that's designed just for that. There are people that are answering those calls and taking that information. It doesn't discount the information. It doesn't say that it's not important, and certainly they'll take the phone call. However, it may not be as intense of an interaction between a 911 operator and a dispatcher. So I think that the 911 is best reserved for emergencies. That is a very high number, think about that, of 911 calls. I want to talk about one thing that is a common thing that happens in the police side of it. There are 911 is inappropriately used. perhaps by children, or perhaps by someone who picks up the phone and dials 911, maybe just to see if it works or to see what happens when they call 911 and the person answers 911, what is your emergency? And they just hang up. Well, that's a 911 hang up type call. That's how it's coded. Although there's no emergency, we don't know that. So the typical protocol is for the 911 operator to call that number back and see if someone answers that phone number. And if they do, ask them, this is 911, is there an emergency there? And the person, if they're honest and it was a mistake, would simply say, I made a mistake. I dialed this in error. There is no emergency here. They may ask you your name. They're listening also to the background noise. Is there background noise that is a clue or a cue that could overwhelm your story that everything is okay if someone's screaming in the background or if someone is in distress in the background, or something that the call taker hears in the background, even though you say it's okay and you did answer the phone and you did give your name, that dispatcher or that call taker is going to decide whether to send a unit out there or not. So if they call back and there's no answer, that's a pretty clear indication that something could be wrong. Maybe you were in distress and you tried to call 911, but you were incapacitated before you could finish the call. Or you medically couldn't say what was wrong, or you were overwhelmed by smoke or fire, or who knows. So it's a tremendous tax on our first responders to answer 911 calls that were not real. However, you don't know until you're there.
So this is something that should be respected too, and knowing when to not call is as good as knowing when to call, because it takes time away from somebody who could really need those services having to call back a 911 hang-up.
That's right. And, besides the one-time error where you answered the phone and it was just that, an error, there are criminal penalties and statutes which address inappropriate use of 911 for all the reasons you just said. A 911 operator is going to be taken away from the ability for he or she to then process incoming real emergency phone calls. So I think that's a good rule. I think that's a good statute to enforce if you have someone who does this all the time, because which time is real and which time is not real, we don't know. So I think it's a good statute and a good rule that if you abuse this system and you have no need for these services, but you purport that you do, or you're doing it for fun because you think it's funny, there needs to be some type of penalty attached to that behavior.
So when I'm calling 911, I really do have an emergency I can't handle. I've called 911. I've stayed on the line with the operator until the first responder arrives. What do I do then? Do I need to retell the story to the first responder? Do they already know what's going on? What's the best idea about how I've been talking to somebody on the phone, but now there's somebody in the house or wherever I'm at. How do I interact with them?
Let's start with the environment of the approach by the police officer, fire department, or EMS. If it's at night, certainly. If you have a gate outside, make sure the gate is unlocked where they can access your property. If you have a lights outside, turn them on. If you have lights inside your house, turn them on. If you have pets, especially if pets are guard-type pets that bark a lot or that may try to bite someone, a stranger, secure those pets. These are important steps. Now, there's many different scenarios as to how the police, fire, ambulance arrive and what occurs when they do. But it's real important to make your arrival make their arrival as easy as possible by doing those simple things: lights on, the doors unlocked, the fence unlocked or gate, and then pets put away. Now, certainly, there's many different approaches that could be used. You may not be in the house anymore if it's a fire scenario. You may be in the house with a police scenario. You may be in the house with a medical emergency. But if the medical emergency occurs, you want to be able to, if you can, gather any medications that the person that they're responding to in distress may be taking. You may want to, if you have time, move furniture away from the approach to that person. So if the emergency medical people decide to transport that person, a stretcher could be brought in and you're able to get access to that person. Mm-hmm. Now, these are all things that are great to do if you have time and perhaps you're not treating that person. But if you can do these things, it improves efficiency, and it also could make a big difference in how it goes with the response. If, let's say, there's a police response required because of some type of a burglary, or you have someone who is broken in your home, or you have a home invasion, and let's say, for instance, you have firearms in the house, it's critically important that the officers who are arrive in a safe environment with no weapons present except for theirs. So we know, or we think, that you're the caller who called the police, but we don't know that for sure. Could you be the suspect who called us, or could you be acting like the homeowner, and the homeowner really is the one who's injured or worse? So it's important, once again, to stay on the line with 911. They may ask you, what are you wearing? Are you armed? Yes, I am. What type? How are you armed? And have shots been fired? Yes. How many shots? And is the suspect who broke in your house, are they there still? Are they armed? Are they alive? Those are all qualifying questions that we need to be able to process the response, to be able to have an adequate, safe response to enter that scene. So anything you can tell the police, ambulance, or fire in a calm manner, in a safe way, critically important.
Let's keep talking about police a little bit. The police arrive, and I say, I'm the one that called, and I'm still on the phone with 911. It's obvious. I've already described who I am to them. How can I best help the police get to what they need to get to? How can I help them? How can I aid them once they're in my presence?
Well, remember, it's not just a one-way conversation. If you're talking to a 911 operator or a call taker or a dispatcher, it's not just a one-way conversation. Our dispatchers, our 911 call takers are very experienced and trained in giving you information and telling you. They may tell you some things to do. They may tell you to put a weapon away if one is present. They may tell you that we are arriving in 30 seconds, in a minute, that when we do arrive, here's what I want you to do. And they may have you stand in a certain location. They may have you raise your hands until they know who is who. They may have you do certain things to prepare the officer to integrate with you, because they don't know who is who. So their communications to you are critically important to follow immediately if you can. And whether it's putting a weapon away or standing in a certain position or doing something, the officer is hearing the same information. So if the call taker or the dispatcher tells you, look, we want you to walk out of the front door. We know you're wearing a red shirt and blue pants. We want you to walk out of the front door, and we want you to have your hands raised in the air. That is critical information and instructions for you to do, because the officer is now going to be expecting to see that occur. And if it occurs, then there will be a transfer of instructions from the 911 or dispatcher to the officers on the scene. They will then they'll be handed off to them. You will be. And then the officers may say, okay, all right, I want you to turn around, 360 degrees around. I want you to lift up the bottom of your shirt. They may ask you, do you have any weapons on you? There may be additional instructions for you to walk towards them or turn around or kneel down. Whatever the instructions are, it's in everyone's best interest to follow them immediately. Once the officers secured the scene, that's his or her main goal, is to make sure that no one's injured any further than if they have been, and that certainly they're not injured. So following those instructions, very critically important. Now, once that occurs, someone's going to talk to you, one of the officers on the scene. You'll probably end communications at that point with 911 or the dispatcher or call taker. And the new communication stream is going to come from the officer, right? They're going to want to know what's going on. Tell me they already know basically what's happening, but I want you to tell me what's going on. Well, I was at home, and all of a sudden someone kicked in my front door, and they came in, and they were armed, and they had a gun, and they tried to rob me, and I had a firearm, and I defended myself. They're going to want to know, what does that mean? You defended yourself. Did you fire your firearm? Yes. Did you strike the person? Yes. If it happened that way. Mm-hmm. They're going to want to know who else is inside the house. They're going to want to know the person are they still alive? Do they have a firearm still? Do you know, where's your firearm that you used? Where is it? Then once they determine that, that's going to shape their movement towards the house, and that's going to shape their response to be able to be safe. Certainly they're going to evaluate a person who's injured and provide medical assistance to them. There could be an ambulance already on the scene or one en route based on the call taker's information that you gave that someone was shot. They're going to roll an ambulance out there immediately, right? So the officer's role really is two parts. It's to stop any further damage to anybody, and then the second step is to provide medical care, and the third step is to preserve that scene where this occurred as a crime scene. So each one of those steps is critically important for this process to occur, but it all begins with the 911 call and the relationship between you and the call taker, the dispatcher, and the arriving police. It's a relationship-based communication transfer that's very important.
It's a very powerful response you're describing. You call a number, and then a group of people possibly show up to your house trained and ready to help with this exact situation, knowing what you're talking about. Is there a standard response time, and what kind of issues contribute to how long it takes for the medical or the fire or the police to come?
There are hundreds, if not more than hundreds, of types of calls that are coded into either an offense type or an investigative words or something. It could be something like a local alarm has went off at a residence. It could be an active shooter event that's going on right now. and everything in between. So depending upon the question tree that the 911 operator or the call taker or dispatcher is listening to and answering from the story you're telling, those types of responses are going to be coded either in a priority 1, 2, 3, or perhaps 4. And the priority 1 call is the most serious. It's an active event in progress. I will define it as where loss of life or injury to someone is likely to occur or will continue to occur if we don't get there immediately. That is a call which has lights and siren. Multiple units will respond. A supervisor may respond. A priority 2 call is a call that maybe your house was broken into. There's no one there now, but they broke a window out, they came in and they stole something. That's a priority 2 call that is important and necessary to be responded to, but it's not a lights and siren. A priority 3 call, even lower in priority, could be a barking dog that just won't stop barking, or someone's playing music kind of loud at a strange hour. That's a lower priority call versus the call. Remember, when these first responders are driving to solve this situation and help you, their life is at risk once again, just driving there. And perhaps it endangers other drivers as well, because an emergency vehicle has lights and siren, but it sometimes they're not seen or heard. So there are terrible accidents that occur because the first responder is trying to get to you to help you, and then are engaged in an accident on the way. So the call takers, 911 operators, the dispatchers are all listening to your story, and they're assigning a priority response to your call. There could be in your area or district or city or beat or wherever it is that this is occurring, there could be 25 calls holding, because we have limited police resources. We need more police resources. The police do an outstanding job in helping citizens, and that's their primary job, is to protect people and to stop injury, and then secondarily to protect property and to make sure that that everyone's okay. So it's a tremendous responsibility. And we don't do enough or say enough about our police and our responders and fire and EMS. They are really the true heroes of us and our guardians. And I think that when you see a policeman, just tell them thanks, because they're sacrificing a lot for what could happen.
Is there anything else we should know about this, or any other light we can shed onto what happens when you call, or who's there to help?
I think it's important to remember that 911 is a real thing, and it's very valuable, and it's very serious. It's designed for alerting emergency scenarios to those providers and responders who will help you. You're right. Our responders and our call takers and our dispatchers all work together. I call it flipping the switch. And when you make that 911 call and you tell them certain things, they then are going to have a response to that. And the more information you can give in an accurate manner, in a calm manner, is critical to how quickly they arrive and what the response may be. So again, there's no charge for using 911. If you make a mistake or you dial it inappropriately, just say so. If you have children who have used 911 or inappropriately used it, that's a very important learning opportunity to stop that behavior and let them know and educate them about how important it is to not do that. But I'll leave you with this. Have confidence in our responders. And the call takers and the 911 operators don't really get a lot of fanfare. They're kind of the hidden person, but they're very valuable and they're very important in this process. So I think that you can have confidence that when you need emergency services, they're going to come. And that's a comforting thing to know.
Well, thank you, Robert, for all of that insight. And thank you to all first responders. And the unsung heroes of this first responder system is that 911 call operator and dispatcher. Thank you for doing what you do. You're helping us stay safe. Our intention here at the Safe Secure 360 podcast is to maybe let the world be a little bit safer for you too. Thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, and leave comments. If you want to see us talk about something, let us know. We are always grateful for you, and come check us out again next week. Thank you. This is the Safe Secure 360 podcast.